Africa and in the world as a whole. Now, when you look at these countries, it tells you a lot. And then I'm focusing my main point on West Africa, specifically Niger, Chad, and Mali, because these are regions I did a bit of studies on and my research were focused on. You could realize that these are areas where climate change is taking a great effect on all aspects of their life. And then primarily due to the fact that the Sahara Desert is expanding. It's expected that in the next 30 years, the desert will expand as much as 10%, which means that there's going to be a lot of challenges, which already some have realized, especially with regards to water access and socioeconomic activities. So, as young people celebrating World Earth Day today, our main focus beyond that of employment, beyond that of education on the continent, one key area we need to channel more energy into is to how to deal with this challenge of climate change, which poses a threat to all of us and even the generation yet unborn. Why does this pose as a challenge? Because you have a continent where the largest population trend is on the line of young people. That is as much as 60% of the population are young boys and girls who are trying hard to make ends meet. And then with all the struggles and with all the challenges, you also find out that climate change is setting in. It means that for students who are studying either water, energy, or climate change per se, your research, your project, your ideas should have a greater portion focusing on tackling this issue of climate change in your respective country, not only that in your sub-region and in the whole continent as a whole. So I challenge you all doing the listening, whether you are into academia, whether you are a worker in the formal or informal sector, that your deeds, your doings, and your activities should reflect on how it can help resolve an aspect of climate change, which is very broad, and I believe the main speaker will be highlighting a lot on it. If you are doing research and you are from the water sector, don't only focus on access to water. How does that access to water help in solving an aspect of climate change? If you are into energy, of course, you'll be looking more into fossils and renewable energy. But how does this contribute to solving climate change? And the best of all, as I may say, is always to look at the nexus between water, energy, climate change, and how practically you can come out with programs and projects and ideas. Not just writing a thesis and dumping it, but getting a thesis that can help in solving a localized community problem, which will aid in combating climate change within the African setting. So on this note, I believe these are just snapshots of the whole presentation Dr. Beatrice will be delving deep into. So I encourage you all to stick and stay here and then be ready to ask a lot of questions. Of course, I'll be joining in when the questions and answer session also comes on board, and Mirana also tell us more with pictures and evidence to back this whole session. So happy World Earth Day to each and every one of us. May we be reminded that we have a key role to play in this fight against climate change, and together we can win. Thank you.
We are pleased to hear you us and for the short and brief introduction you've given to us and the role that the youth have to play to fight against climate change and equally mitigate it. So, right away, we are inviting the former leader of PCCGC in the person of Mirana to give us a brief talk about her own experience as a youth. You're welcome, Mirana.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm sorry for all inconveniences with my internet connection, but I could fix it now. So I will start right away. So thank you for the opportunity for letting me to be here today to share about my perspective about the role of youth in combating climate change. So as we all know, today we celebrate the 50th celebration of the World Earth Day. So this celebration started 50 years ago in 1970, where millions of American people went on strike to protest against environmental ignorance and environmental issues. But as we can see now, 50 years later, we still have this issue, which increased every day. So that's why it's very important that youth have important role to combat that issue, to contribute in combating the climate change. So that's exactly the theme for this year. But okay, let's start with the importance of youth in Africa. So as someone already introduced, half of the population in the planet is less than 30 years old. And especially in Africa, 19 out of the 20 youngest countries in the world are in Africa, and especially for our age, more than 1/3 of the population is aged between 15 to 34. It means that we really have important role to play, and our voice matter, our actions matter, and youth should be a resource for this continent. So, first of all, before we take action, I think the most important is that we should be aware first that climate change is real, because some of us, many people don't really believe, like, is climate change real? Is it just political issue or people who want to make business? Yeah, it's true that there are people who try to make business with it, but we should know as well that it's really real. So from my perspective, from an island country in Madagascar, we really notice the important issue, the devastating effects of climate change, especially the flood issue which hit the country last year, as you can see in the picture. We have a lot of cyclones as well affecting the country, and yet, yes, we used to have it every year, but it's becoming more unpredictable and more serious every year. However, in the south part of the country, there is drought, and it affects a lot the agriculture and the living condition of the country. So if we are really convinced that climate change is real and it affects our daily lives, our economy, our social life, so what action can youth take? So from my perspective, I think instead of being just passive victims, youth should really take actions. So first, I think it should start by ourselves, like we just take individual daily habits, like for example, turn off the light. We always say that, but I know that many of us don't really have those habits, like turn off the light, or to save water, not to waste water, try to recycle what we can recycle, or when we go to the market, just bring your own bag instead of collecting a lot of plastic. Yeah, it's simple, but we don't really work on that. Even myself, like, I know that, but it needs commitment to be used to that. When you are convinced yourself, you take your actions, you try to raise awareness around you as well, like what we do in the club to share awareness online and to share, to sensitize our family, our surrounding neighbors and stuff. Then you take local actions in the club, in your community. You plant trees, participate in cleaning. And the last one is you participate, if you have the opportunity, in international events like to ask for climate justice, exchange with other climate activists, since climate change is a global issue. So it's very important as well. So I think that the main guest speaker will speak a lot about that. It's just a brief introduction and my point of view. But okay, so make every day an Earth Day, and thank you very much.
Thank you for that short presentation and the enlightenment you've given us. Some technical issues, but we'll continue right away by inviting our speaker to talk to us in the person of Dr. Beatrice Njenga. Dr. Beatrice Njenga is an international development consultant and innovative development solutions in education, energy, and environment. She is equally the former head of education of the African Union. And right away, we're going to be privileged to hear her talk to us on the role of youth in combating climate change. So Therefore, we give the floor to Dr. Beatrice Njenga.
I'm sorry I missed the presentations by your colleagues, but I know you are critics of water and energy sciences, including climate change. And so I know you know all the facts and figures. So let me begin by saying to have invited to commemorate this day with you. The earth was created for its youngest species, humankind, and therefore it is a gift in trust. For children, it is useful and important that we have a day to renew our own unfortunate in handling and replenishing the It is born out of a realization that we cannot take for granted our gift of earth and its resources and continue with life as we know it and we have learned. Your graduates in a leading university, therefore you know the facts and the figures. Facts and figures are not enough. When we find ourselves left to count down to inevitable destruction, watching powerlessly, we take out more than we can or are willing to replenish. Can you hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay. Denying access for many neighbors in our generation and for even more in generations to come if the species survives. We have clearly articulated the kind of SDGs as well as the ones in Agenda 2063. The coherence between the global goals and the African vision is much greater than ever before because of the improved democratic process of deriving the SDGs. So as we observe Earth Day, we do so from an African perspective while keeping in mind our place in the global arena. As postgraduate students, you are less than 2% of your age cohort and an even tinier percentage of our entire population. So the question may be, what difference can you make? You are a special and privileged lot because of your education. You are more empowered than most Africans, and therefore you must equally be fit to lead in the appropriate direction. Today, what we grappled with in the 1970s and 1980s. Agenda 2063 still talks of the realistic but modest demand for inclusive growth, sustainable development, eradication of poverty and the disease burden, among others. SDGs still refer to the differentiated impacts on the environment by developed versus developing countries, and the need for bigger polluters to pay more, and those who have benefited more from earth resources to support those who are still grappling with basic issues around energy, water, industrialization, biodiversity, employment, entrepreneurship, urbanization, and others remain the same, having changed only in terms of numbers, perhaps. In 2015, the world signed up to raising $100 billion per year by 2020 to combat climate change and help developing countries' adaptation and mitigation. In 2020, just less than 2 months ago, AU heads of state and government on climate change are still asking for the same, whereas less than $20 billion has been raised since 2015. Clearly, we cannot base our action or our remedy by relying on others. We need robust fallback positions, and it is clear we cannot rely on others. We must look harder inwards and draw from our latent potential and inherent strength. To digress a little, COVID has forced us in Africa to rediscover our innovative and inventive gene. Young people, including mere students, as well as people on the streets, but also our experts, have stepped up to produce medical equipment and protective clothing that we, up to now, had thought that we always had to import. I see teachers without relevant training endeavoring to help children continue learning even with minimal internet access. So we know if we needed a reminder that we can do better than keep waiting for handouts. The human agent is the key to sustainable development. It seems to me, therefore, that one of the keys to sustainable development and responsible and citizenship is in three factors for this human agent: empowerment, integrity, and fairness. Empowerment is through transformative education and training. Integrity is being who you say you are, and therefore being responsible and accountable, while fairness is about equitable treatment of others. This must be imbued and reflected in you as youth and as leaders, and this is where you ought to be making the difference. Empowerment through education and training is about ensuring that you as leaders are equipped with requisite knowledge, learning from those before you, including indigenous and endogenous knowledge systems, knowledge about stakeholders you represent and lead, knowledge about the earth over which you are responsible, and last but not least, know what you are going to do. Integrity as how can affect you where we can approach. As a young leader, does your position and positioning reflect continental realities and aspirations and priorities, or are you easily swayed by selfishness, by desire for immediate gratification, by a feeling of entitlement, or by donors? For example, what's the motivation and determinant of your research topic? Is it to do with where you come from, how you'll be able to make a difference? Or is it for a quick ticket to a developed country where perhaps facilities are so much better? And then fairness, as a leader and young person, remembering that there are many constituencies even among youth who must be taken on board, giving voice to all. As a consumer, making choices that do not lightly enrich you and your group while impoverishing others. As young people, you have to strive to be seen as relevant, to be included, to be taken seriously. But even as you do so, what do you do when you are the leader? Young people are increasingly being taken more seriously across Africa and across the world, thanks to the efforts of the African Union and other players. Many governments in Africa are incorporating very young people in leadership, and these people are heading to positions of prosperity and endowment. When you represent others, are you in touch with them? Or do you become a new mode of discrimination and unfairness for other youth in different age cohorts, different ability? How do you bring on board the disabled, gender, social and economic status, education level, or even access to media? When you claim you're engaging with young people all over Africa, what percentage of young people are you actually teaching when you realize the level of access to the internet? Is there a difference when young people need? Your role and responsibility is to ensure that there is a difference. The earth, and indeed all creation, is groaning, waiting for the manifestation of transformative leadership in our young people. You must stand to be on the side of those who lobby for and promote empowerment for all, to be the leaders who exhibit integrity and who deal fairly. This is your role, not just for climate change, but for life itself. Because in the end, when we act, it's based usually on decisions that have been made from leadership positions. When you become leaders, will you make that difference? But even in your current position, do your choices for consumption, for engagement, and for being reflect that which you say we ought to be doing in order to preserve the earth for our generations and generations to come? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Beatrice, for this wonderful presentation on the role of the youth in combating climate change. I think it's, though with the technical issue, I want to believe that we have been able to get something from today's presentation. And she mentioned key factors as the key, one of the key things to sustainable development, which are empowerment, integrity, and fairness. And she is calling on us as youths to execute transformative leadership, not just in the domain of climate change, but equally in every aspect we face ourselves, in every leadership position we face ourselves, keeping in mind that whatever decision we take as youth is going to greatly affect our planet. Thank you very much, Dr. Beatrice. We are so sorry for the inconveniences, the network issue we are having today. And at this point in time, I would like to call on the attendees. We are moving straight to the question and answer session of today's webinar. If you have any question, you can type in the chat, and your question will be addressed by our presenter. The first question is coming from Hammond, and it says, what role can PAUWES students play to mitigate climate change in their respective countries? Dr. Beatrice, here is a question from Hammond, and the question is, what role can PAUWES students play to mitigate climate changes in their respective countries? Thank you.
Are there others, or should I respond to that one?
Yes, there are other questions.
Can I hear some more?
Okay, Doctor, the next question is, should the youth continue to engage in mass protests as a way of getting our leaders to act? What are the pros and cons from this African perspective? This question is from Mark, and I will repeat. He says, should the youth continue to engage in mass protests as a way of getting our leaders to act? What are the pros and cons from the African perspective? The next question.
Yes.
The next question is from Eube Egbe, and she is asking, how can the youth implement climate measures in a country where the voices are not recognized or heard? So far, those are the three questions that have been asked.
Okay, thank you so much for those questions. Our students, I believe the reason you got the scholarship to study in PAUWES was because you demonstrated an interest in doing something for Africa. And doing something for Africa, of course, demands that you know the Africa for which you need to do something. Who is Africa? Who are we as Africans? What is it we want to do? What are our priorities? What's our vision? So the PAUWES student must keep this in mind, and it must be the guidance for what you do as a student, as a researcher, and also when you go back home. It's behoves you when you go back home to identify the existing opportunities. And I'd like to include the second question about mass protests. Sometimes mass protests are a result of, with all due respect, ignorance. You assume there's a wall between you and those to whom you want to speak, without realizing that there may be a back door where you can pass and really engage. So it's very important that you identify what opportunities actually exist. Because there are many opportunities for influencing policy, but there are even more opportunities for action at the grassroots. By the time you're taking into the street, you must be able to say, this is what I was endowed with, and this is what I did with it, and therefore, this is why I think it's the way we should go. But to go on the street without having walked the road that you're demanding of others it's a lack of integrity, and it's really selfishness. And a lot of the time, I believe it's not necessary. So make sure you have the facts and figures, know what the opportunities are, and you have yourselves engaged in action to make things different. Even if it's policy you want to influence, it's always best to start from what works. No, it works because you have done it. You have done your best with it. And in PAUWES, I believe you're not just going to go and find jobs. I know some of you already have jobs, some of you do not. But more, I believe there's a spirit of entrepreneurship that's being instilled in you to identify opportunities where you can do something and thereby attract resources and other support. Where voices are not being recognized, you have to find which voice is being recognized and attach yourself to it at first. But I believe what's more important is for you in the first place to be found doing the right thing. Not just jumping onto a bandwagon that somebody has said, oh, we must picket the government because they are building a hotel in the park. Yes, but come up with the facts and figures. They will probably tell you that, oh, the hotel will employ so many people and, there'll be markets for food and all that, but you have to have your counter facts and figures. And you must find that opportunity to engage before you go to the street. And the opportunities are there increasingly. I'm not able to go into details for each country, but I know that increasingly government is being involved and people from the region are being given the opportunity to make their contribution to what ought to be done within their region and also at the national level. And then, of course, there's the African Union. Engage with them also and see what opportunities are they able to make available for your voice to be heard at that level. And if your voice is going to be heard, make sure it counts for something more reasonable than just your voice. In other words, making sure that you actually represent that constituency you claim to represent, and that you too have enabled others to contribute their voice, so that by the time you're being heard, it's a bigger voice, because it's a voice from a majority of the young people or people who might not otherwise be heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor, for the answers to the various questions. We have two more questions. The first question is from Gina, and it says, I want to know, as youth fighting climate change, is there any need for gender integration? How and why? And the last question is from Brenda, and she is asking, how can sustainability be enforced in the rural community where people want to exploit so as to be rich without following the policies endorsed? Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Rita. I think the gender question, with due respect, I'm surprised that it would still arise, because I believe at this time, and especially for young people, I thought I should be able to take it for granted that you know that in all things, the issue of gender integration, gender mainstreaming remains key. Because after all, you're talking about half the population, and therefore their perspectives and their involvement must be important, not just because they are part of the population, but also because often they bring a very different perspective, if perhaps because of their socialization rather than their gender, but they happen to be the other gender. So really, and we have seen traditionally, as we said, you have to be learning from those who went before, including from indigenous and endogenous knowledge. We know that in many indigenous knowledge systems, we have, in particular, women as carers of the earth, and from whose practices we should be able to learn, then maybe using technology to grow and develop that knowledge to be more applicable today. So definitely, yes, just like in every other issue. And then, because women are childbearers, I don't know if that is 100% true today, but generally speaking, women are childbearers, and therefore they are more likely to appreciate a stake in the second question about rural areas. Well, this is a living reality. I'm in a rural area, therefore my access to internet is not so good. But I'm sure maybe in another year or so, it's going to be perfect as the voice demand for it increases. Rural communities, well, make up most Africans, because Africa is still largely a rural continent. So if they are not involved in what's happening, then we would be missing out, and we are not likely to get anywhere with it. But they have to be involved from a position of understanding. One has to have a good understanding of why they do what they do, and then what are their alternatives. And if what they're being asked to do is for the sake not just of themselves, but of the generations present, the generations to come, the country, the continent, then somebody else also, and this would be the government at the local or national or other level, must bring in support systems to make the right decision. So we cannot assume that they are so ignorant, they're just money-minded, and they've seen where money can be made through destruction of the environment. It has to be a very contextualized engagement with them, rather than top-down approaches that you've done the wrong thing, stop it, you're bad. But this is what you're doing. But this is what the situation is like. Opportunities in order to preserve the environment, or in order to encourage the preferable action. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. We are going to take one more last question, and that will be, and we'll be going towards the end of our webinar session. These two, the first one is from Hulu, who says, I think we need a holistic approach to tackle these issues. Can a down-top method be effective? Can we really change individual actions? Then the last one from Brenda, she says the prevailing markets cannot do quality control. How can the youth fight climate change when it is more expensive to farm eco-friendly and people are not aware of the poor quality of food brought to the market or even know the implications of the consumption? Thank you so much, Doctor, for the answers to the various questions addressed. With this, I think we have come to the end of this webinar session. Despite the challenges faced, but indeed I must say it was a wonderful session, and we are pleased